Welcome to a new episode of Brain, Music and Learning, and today we are especially talking about learning because our guest here today is Ita Puusepp. Welcome.
Thank you.
Wonderful to have you in our podcast. You have just defended your doctoral thesis. This one.
Yes.
We have the book right here. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
That's amazing. And your topic is mindsets. What does mindset mean?
The term mindset refers to the beliefs that we have about the malleability of human abilities, and this can include intelligence, more specific academic abilities such as math ability, but also people can hold different beliefs regarding the malleability of personality or social skills. So the mindset really refers to those beliefs in general, and these beliefs range on a spectrum from fixed to growth. So the fixed mindset denotes a belief that these human abilities are fixed to a certain level, they can't be changed. You're either born with it or not. And the growth mindset refers to a belief that these abilities are malleable and can be developed with effort.
So, as an extreme, a fixed mindset might be a person who talks about musicality, for example, and always says that this child is very musical and that's why they sing so well, and this child doesn't have any musicality at all and that's why it's like worthless to take piano lessons or whatever.
Yes, and that it's kind of the child is born with it. It's something that comes from the family. So
it's in the genes or somehow the child is carrying it with them. And then the growth mindset as an extreme would be a person who believes that you can learn anything. You just start practicing and then you will learn it.
Yeah. But I think it's also important to mention that the mindset theory is not a theory about that everyone can do absolutely everything with the same amount of effort or whatever. So it doesn't really ignore individual differences, but it focuses on the process of learning, that from where we are at the moment, we can do something to get better at it.
Yeah. So if you think about teachers, they see both. So they definitely will see children who believe that they cannot learn or that they are just natural born talents and they don't have to practice at all. They just know everything. And then they probably also see children who have this growth mindset that they have already experience of practicing and learning via practicing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially when we come to the context of school, it is important to focus on also, yes, there are individual differences, but then what does the growth mindset mean in the context of school? What is the purpose of the education as well? That we think we meet the students and how do they progress from where they are at the moment. So I think in that sense, the mindset theory is definitely very relevant in the school context.
Yeah, and it would be important for a teacher to have at least some degree of growth mindset.
Yes, definitely. And the research shows that how the teacher organizes their classroom and which practices they use, that also shapes the mindset of the students. And it might also be that the teacher explicitly says that they hold a growth mindset or they think so, but sometimes they are not aware of that some of their practices might convey another message to the students. So it's also not only saying that the work is done after I as a teacher say that yes, I do believe that the children can develop and learn, but constantly reflecting critically on what we as educators say or do in the classroom. How might the students perceive this? What kind of message might it convey to them?
So it's those very little words like whether you use the word talent or whether you use the word knowledge, or if you prefer to use words like practicing or learning.
Yeah, what you emphasize in the feedback that you give, giving whether positive feedback, but also when giving negative feedback, then what do we focus on? And also what research shows is that also what we think about how we, if a child encounters a failure, then we as grown-ups want to kind of support them as well and help them get over this emotional experience. So also the way we try to make the children feel better when they encounter a failure, and this has been shown among teachers, that teachers might say that it's okay, not everyone's good in math. So actually the idea of the teacher is to make the child feel better, that maybe they should focus on, see, you're really good in arts, for example, not everyone's good in math, it's okay. But what does that convey? What is the message that might convey to the child? That might be, okay, so I'm not the person who will be good in math. So being aware of this as well. It's not only our mindset, the practices, but also our beliefs about how we motivate children.
And parents might like to say something nice also after a big failure, like, don't worry, I was also very bad at math.
Yes, exactly.
I think it runs in our family, don't worry about it. So this is actually a kind of a nice thing to say to a child, but at the same time, it's fixing the fixed mindset more and more.
Yeah, the implicit messages these our reactions convey. So it's about becoming aware of these and reflecting on, and I think a lot of taking the position or perspective of the child, that how might they interpret it. Of course, that was not my idea as a parent to convey that message, but what might they pick up from there implicitly?
Exactly. And also when they succeed. So if you always say to a child who always gets the highest mark in math, for example, that, yeah, I'm not at all surprised because you are always so good at math, you're actually not emphasizing the effort that they have put in to achieve it.
Exactly. And I think that also creates this, also from my personal experience, I remember I was good in math in school, and then in one class we had this test that I'd completely failed, and I thought it was the end of the world, because now everyone will find out that I am not actually good in it. And so also reflecting on this from my personal perspective, I think for a child that really, or student who performs well all of the time, and maybe this the role of effort and the practice is not emphasized so much, because maybe until a certain level, due to their previous experience, things do come a little easier for them. But then if there's no acknowledging of this, that it might get more difficult at a moment, and that's totally okay. That does not mean that this thing is not for you or so. So if you don't have this knowledge, I remember as a child, it felt like the whole world is crashing down once you have this single failure or you don't manage so well in it, because every performance kind of, if it's a good performance, it conveys the message that, okay, I'm good at it. So, but then if with a fixed mindset you encounter a failure, then that is a sign that, okay, now everyone knows, now it actually came out that I actually do not have this fixed amount of this certain level of disability. So it's not only about students who maybe do not perform so well, but I think it's also very important that the growth mindset and the role of effort in learning, and that it's supposed to feel difficult at moments, that message would also reach those children and students for whom it maybe hasn't been so challenging until that moment.
And for a teacher who notices a pupil like that, for whom everything seems to be like very easy and they don't need to put a lot of effort because they just know those things so far. So the teacher, of course, knows that there will be a day when this is not enough. So a good thing for a teacher would be to give a challenge to that child, something that would be difficult for that child.
So they would still get the experience that, okay, you have to put in effort and you encounter failures, you make mistakes, and that is totally okay, that this is part of the learning process. And I mean, if I don't think we can blame students if they haven't been provided with these experiences. Then how are they supposed to know what this means and how to deal with those situations? So it would be our responsibility to also offer these type of experiences also to students who otherwise perform well in school.
So practically for a teacher, that would mean that they would have to have very easy tasks so that those who always feel that everything is so difficult and I can't do anything, they would also get the experience that, oh, but there are also these things that I can do really well after practicing. And then for those who have felt that everything is really easy, to have some very challenging tasks that they actually cannot do without practicing.
But here I think it's also very important to, again, bring out that there's this study also done by people in Helsinki University that shows that we have to again take the student perspective. I think that is definitely a good approach, but we have to be aware of how does the teacher again provide these different tasks, because if they have in their mind, okay, these are the students who need the easy tasks, these are the ones who always need the difficult tasks. So once the students start to perceive in the classroom that, okay, I am part of this group of students, and so that implicitly again might convey a message of, okay, I'm in the group that gets always the easy tasks. So it actually, this teacher practice, when teacher really has this ability groups in the classroom, that is associated with students' fixed mindset, having a more fixed mindset. So it's again critically reflecting on how do we present these tasks, what kind of a message it might convey to the students. So I think it's in some sense makes things more challenging. There's no this one size fits all, or okay, magic bullet, we use this and this works all the time, but it's a constant process of reflecting of, okay, how do I present these tasks, or how do I convey this message to the students that they get different tasks this time, but this doesn't mean that in the next class they might not get a different task of the difficulty level.
So a good way for a teacher might be to say that, okay, now I notice that you did really well in this task and you're ready already. So because of that, I'm going to give you this next task, which is way more difficult.
Yes, that the students wouldn't feel that the task they get today labels them or their ability.
Yeah, that's really important. So there are some, we have already been talking about math, and I think that's a good example of a school subject where fixed mindset is more typical, especially if we talk about parents of children. And then children, of course, copy those beliefs from their parents, but also from their teachers. So I would assume that music also would be one of those where fixed mindset kind of speaking is quite typical.
I believe as well.
We have even a word for it, musicality, which is like really a labeling word.
Indeed. There are, in the academic subject, it has been shown that math is especially the type of subject that people have a more fixed mindset towards that. But for example, in languages, people tend to hold less this belief that this is a fixed ability.
And that's probably simply because everybody has practiced for the language test. So you have a vocabulary test tomorrow, you have to learn these 10 new words, and that takes a certain amount of time. And if you spend that time, so then you will get highest grade from that little test because you did practice. So this is like a very effort emphasizing way of teaching languages.
Yeah, and I think also what's important to notice here is that we talk about this, languages or music or math, but when we think about these mindsets or these implicit beliefs, then people can have these implicit beliefs regarding anything that can be considered kind of as a skill or an ability in that sense. It might be that it can even go deeper that, for example, in languages, yes, I believe I can develop, but when it comes to public speaking with this foreign language, for example, that this is something this is not my thing. Or in math, it can be that arithmetics is not my thing. but the other parts of math are, or more of this, that it can really go into more these kind of sub-ability levels.
And those are probably because of the first time that this area of math was introduced, so then they had some kind of experience.
Yes.
Yeah. That's kind of funny that we can really like divide our skill beliefs into this kind of minor categories. But yeah.
And I think also like categories that maybe cross these domains, or when we think about how well I can regulate my emotions, or how well can I regulate my learning, self-regulated learning. I might have a growth mindset regarding math or languages, but I might believe a bit more that I'm not very good at when it comes to setting my own goals and monitoring my own progress in the learning. So that's also like, there are so many levels to this actually, and I think it's also then the teachers and parents' role to also maybe look deeper into what is the specific ability that maybe the student is having a fixed mindset about now, that I should maybe help them to understand so they could kind of get forward.
And that's an experience of learning to learn, recognizing your own beliefs and maybe even changing them. Yeah. So the mindset research has progressed from a general view of like general or everyday mindset towards these more specific areas, but still there is a general mindset also.
There is kind of a tendency towards holding a more fixed mindset across different domains, or a tendency, or people have a tendency of endorsing more of a growth mindset regarding different domains, but there might still be some differences in their beliefs regarding these specific domains.
And the main problems of fixed mindset are this anxiety that is related to performance in general, and then this lack of putting effort, because of course it doesn't make any sense to put effort in if you believe that it's only due to some genetic background or whatever, inborn talent.
Yeah, so for someone with a fixed mindset, when they perceive the need to put in effort, that kind of feels as this is a signal. Now I do not have this innate ability because I have to put in effort. So that kind of, the experience of having to, the need to put in effort might lead them to kind of withdraw from the task because there's no point anymore. If it's a fixed ability, we have to also kind of understand that the behavior of the students concerning, when they concern their experience, these are adaptive reactions from their perspective. We as adults, of course, but this is not adaptive for their academic outcomes or so. But from their perspective, from their experience, from their when they consider what they believe to be true about the malleability of that ability, then from their perspective, that withdrawal is actually an adaptive reaction.
And so they are kind of protecting themselves by withdrawing from the situation. Yeah. And this can, of course, lead into like people setting their goals lower and not aiming to further developing their skills in learning and so on. And of course, also in work life, the same thing.
Yes, the same thing. So the same, we talked about effort, but then also the same applies for when a person with a more fixed mindset encounters challenges or setbacks. We already talked about it a bit, but those signal the same thing. That if you fail, if you're not good at it, then if you have a static innate ability, that is a signal that you don't have enough of that.
Yes. So nowadays we talk a lot about imposter syndrome, and we also talk a lot about the anxiety, especially in adolescents and university students. So do you think that fixed mindset could play a role there?
I think it's definitely not the only thing that explains these, but when we even think about ourselves, that let's say, okay, you have a situation where for someone with a fixed mindset, if your ability is something that is fixed, those situations, like often learning situations or achievement situations, become these moments of judgment. You kind of have to, what you want to, if you have a fixed mindset, this is the moment where you should definitely avoid looking dumb and prove your ability. So when we think about what emotions come along with that, if you think about yourself, for example, in a situation where you have had to prove yourself, it's not very pleasant. It does create some anxiety. And when we think about that, students with a more fixed mindset are more likely to perceive different learning situations as such situations where they have to prove their ability, then their day-to-day school experiences are probably very different from those of the students who hold a more growth mindset, because for them, these learning situations, they don't have to worry about proving their ability. They focus on improving their ability. So all of the energy also goes into mastering what they're working on, but for a more fixed-minded student, the energy goes rather on reflecting about, what happens now if I don't manage to prove my ability? Then that is a sign I don't have this ability. And so
everybody will notice.
Yeah, and that actually also likely takes their attention away from the learning material and might be kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So it's quite deep, actually, in our thoughts, like what we are doing. And if I'm thinking about flow state, which is an amazing state for learning, and I have seen this in children when they become like little scientists and they start doing their experiments and they want to try everything and they fail all the time, of course, but they don't mind because of the flow state. They want to try more and they have a lot of questions. But that actually is only possible if you are not afraid of looking dumb. Because of course they look really stupid. They try stupid things and they fail. But they don't care because they are not worried about how that looks. They are more fixed into getting the information out. They want to know.
Yes, where the focus is kind of. It's not on these worries and thoughts of what happens, but it's in the thing itself.
Yeah, and that's really effective learning. Yeah, both alone, but also in a group. Yeah. So you went to Finnish schools, and you actually did a study on their mindset, on the mindset of the pupils, and you had a lot of participants.
Yeah, around 100.
Yeah, that's a lot for a physiological study. So you recorded EEG, and then you also recorded
skin conductance.
Yes. So that's a lot of data, I guess.
It is.
and you did it twice. So
yes, I did it
before
twice,
and after.
When the students were in grade 3 and when they were in grade 4.
Yeah, so that's a lot of data. And you also were developing the methods of studying mindsets in a physiological study. So your first paper, you have 4 papers in this thesis, which is more than usual in Finland. 3 is typical, but you have 4. And the first one is about the mindsets and failures, neural differences in reactions to mistakes among second grade Finnish girls.
Yeah, the first study, that one was served as a pilot study for the studies coming afterwards. So we simply wanted to use an experimental design that had been used in the US to study these automatic brain responses of grown-ups, but also children, and the associations of these brain responses to mindset. And these brain responses were to errors made in the task. So we used the same task, and we simply wanted to first try it out. How does it work in the Finnish elementary school context? Also, there was only one earlier study that had studied children with such an experimental design. We did the pilot study, and it did show us there were only 10 participants in that study from a larger sample, 5 students that had been classified as holding a fixed mindset and 5 that had been categorized as holding a growth mindset. And we examined the differences in their brain responses to errors in the task. So the task was this kind of a game-like task. There were photos of animals, and the students had to categorize these photos really quickly. And from time to time, they made a mistake, and they realized it. themselves. So we examined the brain responses to these mistakes that they made. And the pilot study did show that there were differences between these brain responses between the fixed and growth-minded students, but that only led to everything that came afterwards because of the small sample size and everything.
Yeah, so it's important to develop a study or a paradigm where the pupils are making a lot of mistakes because of the ERP methodology. You need to average a lot of data together in order to get the response. So it's not only one mistake, but it's like 100 mistakes or something like that. Yeah, and it's also it has to be a kind of a game or task where the children feel that it's important also to succeed. That it's not like worthless.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's why you went on to move over to math.
Yeah.
And your second paper is Mindsets and Neural Mechanisms of Automatic Reactions to Negative Feedback in Mathematics in Elementary School Students. And this is now the study where you have 100 participants.
Yes. So, after the pilot study, because also during the data collection of the pilot study, after having done the EEG measurements and the participants had completed the task, when I removed the electrodes, then I just had this conversation with them. How was this experience? And then I couldn't resist asking that, so do they think they could get better at the task? Which should be that implies what their mindset regarding this game ability or this ability was that they used for the game. And all of them actually said, even though they had been categorized as holding a fixed or a growth mindset, most of them said that of course I can get better at this if I practice. And that really made me think that are we really, the brain responses that we're getting from here, shouldn't the mindset that we measure, shouldn't that match with the task that we use? So when we had measured their more of this like general mindset, but the task was really specific, more of a game, and the children might have an experience of playing these computer games and having this experience that, okay, I can't complete the level now, but I practice and then I can complete this level. So that really led us to kind of think about that maybe we should change the task, or should it, and also regarding the relevance of their school experiences. We were more interested in this, so that actually led us to completely change the task, to focus on the subject domain of math, that we would inspect math ability mindsets, and that the task during which we record the brain activity, that would be a math task as well. So yeah, we finally used this arithmetic task where the children had nearly 100 calculations for which they had to indicate whether this equation on the screen or calculation on the screen was correct or not, and then they got instant feedback. So this time it wasn't their brain responses to errors that they recognized themselves, but it was the performance feedback that they got and their brain responses to this feedback.
So when they made a mistake, they would hear a sound.
Yeah, when they made a mistake, they heard a short sound, but also they saw it on the screen then. We did this unpublished piloting of this math task as well, and first we didn't have that sound, but then it became clear that the children in grade 3, they didn't always understand whether they had made a mistake in the math task. So that's why we decided to include the sound, because we really wanted to prioritize that they are aware of making mistakes.
And that's also partially because of the ERP technique again, that you need a kind of a marker so that all children notice exactly at the same time that this was a mistake. So then you can do your averaging. For the data. Yeah, so that's a little bit different compared to mindset research that doesn't have this physiological study. Yeah, that's really impressive. And then your third paper, development of associations between elementary school students' mindsets and attentional neural processing of feedback in an arithmetic task.
Yeah, so these are the same students that were in the previous study, the nearly 100 students. When in study 2, they were in grade 3 when we assessed them, and it was cross-sectional. So in this study, we used the data that was also used in study 2, but also the students did the a bit more difficult arithmetic task, of course, but they basically did the task again when they were in grade 4 and their mindsets were assessed again. And so we could examine how do these brain responses relate to mindsets and how does this association develop across this one school year.
So during that one school year, of course, they learn a lot of new things in math. So you had to match the task to their level.
Yeah.
It's important so that they make enough mistakes.
Yes,
of course.
And it was not an easy thing for all of the participants because some of them performed really well on the task. But we also had this practice block before the students did the actual task at both grade levels. And based on how they performed in the practice block, they got either a more difficult or an easier version of the actual experimental task then, so that they would make mistakes, but that it wouldn't be overly difficult for them, because that could again lead to withdrawal from the task.
Yes, it doesn't make any sense if everything is wrong always, so you just have to guess. So making these paradigms is a really big part of your study actually, because these types of paradigms haven't existed before.
Yeah, and we can also see that there are very many limitations to these, but it's part of the process, and it did reveal interesting results. And while there were in some sense, more questions raised than answered, but that's kind of the nature of science.
Sounds like science, yes.
Yes. So it's also, I think, gives input for future studies that, okay, maybe we would have to try something else as well, or maybe we would have to look at this as well, and how to overcome maybe the limitations of these studies. But it definitely brought out some interesting results.
So no study is perfect and no paradigm is perfect,
exactly.
Because we have to also match the paradigm with the method of the ERPs.
Exactly. So that has been part of the learning process as well, accepting this imperfection.
Yes. So everybody interested in mindsets or math learning and ERPs, they should focus on these 3 first papers. But then your 4th paper is changes in physiological arousal during an arithmetic task, profiles of elementary school students and their associations with mindset, task performance, and math grade. So this is something completely different. It's not ERPs, but it's actually these signals are recorded from the hand, from the skin of the children.
Yeah, from the electrodermal activity, so that reflects this sweating, and that is related to that reflects the activity of the sympathetic nervous system, and that's the branch of the autonomic nervous system that's responsible for preparing the body for action. And we decided to examine this skin conductance throughout the task. So the participants of this study were, again, they came from the same sample of this 100 students, but this 4th study was again cross-sectional, and it focused on these students when they were in grade 4, because the previous study also revealed that these associations between students' mindset and their brain responses to feedback, that this was marginally stronger when the students were in grade 4, so we decided to focus on students when they were in grade 4, also in the last study. And we had this skin conductance data, and we did something that has not really been done before. Usually this skin conductance data is also averaged across the whole task, and you look at these, whether there are differences in the mean level of this physiological arousal or this sympathetic nervous system activity. But what we did is that the math task was about like 13 to 15 minutes long, and we looked at how this skin conductance level change, or this arousal changes throughout the task. So we did not look at this average across the task in contrast to these ERPs, but whether there are differences in how this arousal changes from the beginning to the end of the task, and whether these fluctuations are related to students' mindsets. And because what the mindset research shows is that students with a more fixed mindset, they might experience more anxiety, and this has been actually shown among elementary school students in a study that has used questionnaires. So students with a more fixed mindset also have this higher math anxiety. And when we think about this state anxiety, that is usually the highest just before you get to the task. We hypothesize that there might be differences in how this physiological arousal, which also reflects then, is higher if the student is more anxious, then we sweat more. So we expected that maybe we could see that mindset is related to this pattern of the changes of the physiological arousal, and we did find an association. And this was actually really exciting because no one had really looked at this change during the task before in relation to mindset.
So there were several trajectories of change that you grouped the kids into.
Yes, so we used this person-oriented analysis because we couldn't really assume that everyone has the same trajectory. So this approach really enabled us to see whether there are different groups. And we found that the largest group was a group of students that had initially a low physiological arousal, and it started to steadily increase throughout the task and was then higher towards the end of the task. Then there was a second group for whom the arousal was initially high in the beginning of the task and then started to steadily decrease towards the end of the task. And then there was a really small group that had an initially high arousal, which then decreased really fast and then started to increase again towards the end of the task.
So the first one, the one that is low in the beginning and then maybe steadily rises a little bit, this is easy to interpret, that you have a child who feels that, he's very confident about starting the task, and then when the task goes on, they actually have to put in a little bit more effort because it's very boring and you still have to keep doing it. So it's quite easy to interpret that. And then also the one that is really high in the beginning, that would be a person who is very anxious in the beginning. But then when the task actually starts and they notice that, okay, now I know what I'm doing, so then they are still putting in a lot of effort, but a little bit less than in the very beginning. So those would sound like fixed and growth mindset. Yeah. Did you find associations?
Yeah, what we found was that this group that had the initially high arousal and then steadily decreasing arousal, that in that physiological arousal profile group, there were more students with a fixed mindset tendency than would be expected if there were no association. So, but for the other profile, physiological profile, the one that was had an initially low arousal and then that increased throughout the task, for that one, after correcting for multiple comparisons, it was not significantly associated with the growth mindset, but before that we saw a tendency that there tended to be more growth-minded students in that profile.
Yeah. So that's very interesting. And for those who haven't recorded the skin conductance, when you talk about sweating, it doesn't really mean sweating in the sense that you would feel the hands to be moist or anything like that. It's a reaction that happens inside the skin, but it can be recorded as a change in the skin conductance. Yes. And this is in our genes. So whenever we are ready for action, also our hands start to be ready in the sense that there is a little bit more moist in our hands to be able to maybe grab something or something
prepare
like that.
For action that has to be completed then.
Exactly. So it's a very primitive reaction and we can't do it ourselves or control it in any way. It just happens. And when it's a very extreme reaction, so then if you are very, very scared of something, so then you might even feel the moisture in the hands. But in this type of task, it's usually just recording, showing it, but not the people feeling it themselves. So it's funny to think that we have those types of reactions in our bodies that we don't really know about unless we make the recording.
But that we can see that already in grade 4, these reactions are associated with what the students believe to be true about the malleability of their abilities.
Yes. So that's amazing. So as a take-home message from all of this, you would probably say that it's worth trying to measure mindset-related things also with neuroscience methods.
I think that these methods, physiological and neuroscientific methods, they provide something in addition to maybe these more what you would call traditional maybe methods, or these observational and behavioral and self-report measures, because they can show something additional. But I think it's also very important to acknowledge the limitations of these methods, and that we cannot really, as these physiological reactions are not a one-on-one marker to any certain psychological process, then we have to be very careful about the interpretations we make. And the best research that we can do when we use these measures is using also in additional these more traditional methods.
So having paradigms that some others have already tried, it makes a lot of sense, but also developing paradigms for those purposes that you want to study. And then always including the questionnaires and interviews, so that you know what the pupils are thinking and what the teachers are thinking.
Yes.
And for a layperson's take-home message from this would be to practice avoiding some words like talent, and start using more words like learning and effort and practicing and this kind of things. And when the child says to you, "I can't do that," you might want to correct, "You can't do it yet."
Yet, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, Ita.
Thank you.